Hi everybody, it's me again, and let's talk about Star Wars. I some of you who watch my videos probably remember that I made a top 4 ways to irritate Star Wars fans, and while I had fun with it, I'm also a Star Wars fan, and one of the things that I did say in that video that I would do is recount what I thought of the 3 trilogies of Star Wars. I can't believe that I'm actually saying 3 trilogies of Star Wars, because isn't there like supposed to be only 1 trilogy or 2 trilogies? One trilogy. so, but after watching all 3 trilogies and putting together each of my thoughts about them, I thought, why not make a list of which movies I liked from least to best? Now, keep in mind a couple things. First of all, I have not seen the Han Solo movie or the Rogue One movies, which I heard were fairly good, or everybody's praising Rogue One. I guess I've yet to see that one, but it wasn't it wasn't part of the trilogy, not really. It's a prequel of the first and better trilogy. Um, but I will give it a chance when I get the chance. But and also I will not be including the non-existent Star Wars Holiday Special. If you want my review on that, or mine and movie fans review on that, I will leave a link below on where you can find us screaming about it, as well as finding out which between that as well as another holiday special, which one was worse. So I and the other thing is that this is my opinion. If you like the movies that I liked the least, then that's fine. We all have our different opinions in this wonderful galaxy far, far away. So, with that in mind, let's get started from bottom to the top. Starting at number 9, The Phantom Menace from the prequel trilogy. This one I like the least. Most of you are probably waiting for me to put Last Jedi on the list, but we'll get into that in another moment. In another moment or two. But honestly, I like Phantom Menace the least because I found it was either too boring or too obnoxious, and not enough character arc in there. This is the series that was kickstarting the prequel trilogy, and for a trilogy that was supposed to introduce us to Anakin Skywalker, who would eventually become Darth Vader, it failed mostly. He did not he did not show up until at least an hour into the movie, and for a series that is supposed to introduce us to this character, that is just wrong. I get that they want to build up on the environment and where it all started before the war, before the ultimate big war that would kickstart the original trilogy, but it failed to capture my interest, especially when it came to the ongoing politics, which had nothing interesting, nothing that I enjoyed, nothing that I liked, and even if and I tried very hard to be invested in what they were trying to say to one another, and what they were and what they were debating about how the Senate works, but it left me with too many questions, like how does a senator, or no, how does a queen go straight from that to being a senator? It just didn't add up for me. And on top of that, I I'm gonna say it like most people probably have already said it, and most of you have already heard it. The other problem is there's too much Jar Jar Binks in there, and I'm sorry, I do not like this character at all. I would have been more invested if he contributed more to the to Qui-Gon as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he barely does. I mean, it's like he's a drag. I mean, that he's a drag along character and completely pointless. I mean, yeah, he leads them to the underwater city, but that's the most that he does. He doesn't do anything else after that except make all these jokes that really get everybody into trouble. And the only thing I keep thinking is, okay, he served his purpose. Why is he still coming along? I mean, I get that he's banished and all, but he's contributing nothing. You could cut him out of the story and you really wouldn't miss anything. Or mess anything up. And I will say this before anybody else gets upset or angry. I think the actor does a great job. I think he's a terrific actor. And he did come up with a unique voice. It's just the material he was given was not that great. I mean, I really hope he went on to do a lot better movies. And, well, let's be honest. Saying that you starred in Star Wars is amazing enough to put on your resume. So, I really hope that he went on to have a good career. Props to you. Sorry that the character didn't do good. But what were some good things about it? Because for all the bad things that I've said about it, I do think there are some good elements in there. I think the action is really good. I think that the fight between the fight in there at the last 20 minutes was terrific. I mean, I loved when they were fighting the double lightsaber as well as that John Williams music. I mean, you cannot go wrong with that music. But aside from that, if I had to make anything better about that movie, I would say more Anakin Skywalker. Develop who he is at the current stage and what he is supposed to become, because they declare him as the chosen one, and we don't really see much of his skills in there except as a machinist. We don't see him using the Force. We don't see him do anything significant other than pod racing, which is cool, but really, for a series that is supposed to introduce us to Anakin Skywalker and establish him, this really doesn't do a good job, or do him that good of a job introducing him. So that's why I put Phantom Menace as number 9. Number 8, Rise of Skywalker. Boy, oh boy, what a disappointment. What a disappointing way to wrap up the sequel series that I was liking. And honestly, yeah, so much of it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like that the same writers were there at all. I mean, you don't have to look at the credits to feel like it was a different writer in there, or that the motivations have completely changed, and that plot points came out of complete nowhere. Like the fact that, spoiler alert, Palpatine's back. Okay, cool, Palpatine's back. When did this happen? How did this happen? And why did this happen? You're left with so many questions that never get answered and never go anywhere. And you're always getting spontaneous surprises about each of these moments. Like the fact that in the end, Kylo Ren and Rey, who have been nemesis, suddenly kiss out of nowhere. Were they supposed to be a couple? I would expect that out of a fan fiction, not a huge budget movie that established them as being against each other or possibly being related. Which, thankfully, they're not related. In fact, actually, I think the plot twist on who Rey's family in there is brilliant, is a brilliant concept. She's apparently the granddaughter of Palpatine. And, okay. But they don't do much with that either. It doesn't quite sink in with her as much as it did Luke when he found out that Darth Vader was his father. And And also, a lot of their plans, I mean, a lot of the sacrifices that they make in these movies, like erasing C3PO's memory database to translate a forbidden Sith message, all feel retconned. I, cause I, they resolve it quickly. With R2D2's databank and restoring C3PO's memory. Okay, cool. I love seeing 3PO get his memory back, but they established it as a sacrifice, as a risky sacrifice. Why didn't they leave it alone? Or why didn't they let it take the time that it needed? The trailer teased us with C3PO saying that he was taking one last look at his friends, even though really they weren't quite his friends because they, the people he kept hanging out with were treating him pretty rudely, even though really he is quite a complainer. Um, but yeah, a lot of things didn't add up, and the twists that they throw in just are completely out. They throw them out of the window. They throw in great ideas, but then they don't establish them. What were some things I liked? I liked when the Jedi were, the ghosts of the Jedi were encouraging Rey to fight against Palpatine when she was almost defeated. I liked how Ben or Kylo Ren turned around eventually and was able to fight the dark side that was still haunting him. And I have to say that my particular favorite when is when Rey decides to follow in Luke's footsteps and exile herself because she's afraid of herself. And she tries to throw her lightsaber away, but then Luke's ghost comes back and says, hey, go face him. Hey, you have it in you. And I think that was a cool scene, especially since most people usually describe Rey as a Mary Sue, and yeah, I could see that. But at the same time, you saw her despair for a moment. You saw her give up almost, and I don't think that they would do that with a Mary Sue. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, aside from that, I really thought that this was a very weak wrap up to all the Star Wars movies. And on top of that, a very, very weak goodbye to Princess Leia. I get that they had to get rid of her quickly because Carrie Fisher was gone, but they could have really given her a better send-off than what they did here. Because it felt too rushed. In fact, that's the most that I could describe this movie. Rushed, which is also what I will describe another Star Wars movie. On to number 7, Attack of the Clones. Okay, so I think this one was a little bit better than Phantom Menace, mainly because, well, a few things. It was a little more entertaining, in my opinion. I know that a lot of people probably didn't like this one. I actually kind of liked it, and I still cannot help laughing at a lot of the dialogue and how wooden it is. Yeah, the acting and the dialogue is very woodenly spoken and woodenly written. And, well, let's be fair, there was nothing that Hayden Christensen or Natalie Portman could do to salvage these roles because the characters were so poorly developed. So and they received poor direction, so I can't really fault them for that necessarily. Pretty much it was George Lucas's fault in this case, and let's be fair, unless you were somebody like Christopher Lee or unless you were somebody like Christopher Lee, you pretty much could not make the lines "I don't like sand" sound interesting at all. There was nothing Hayden Christensen could do about that scene, and I have gotten fan theories from some of my friends on why he says that line, but still, I still look at some of the lines that are written as what's supposed to be a back and forth love dialogue between Padme and Anakin Skywalker, and it just really, I let's just say it's Twilight. It's Twilight dialogue bad, or laughably bad, because who randomly says I don't like sand, or you're in my soul, it's like a scar on my heart. I mean, it was just hilarious, especially when these characters are not developed. I Like I mentioned before in Phantom Menace, they barely establish Anakin Skywalker's character, and then suddenly in Attack of the Clones, he's suddenly a grown man out of complete nowhere. Why? I why are we supposed to care about this character? When there's been no establishment on how he's become the greatest Jedi or becoming the greatest Jedi in training. And they don't really explain Padme's character either. And like I said before in Phantom Menace, how does a queen go? How do you go from queen to senator? Isn't that demoting instead of promoting? And if she became a senator, how did Leia become a princess? They don't explain these politics. I'm sure that there are fan theories or fan books out there, and I'd love to see some of them. Heck, leave in the comments below if they explain it and where I can find it, because I'm interested. And but for all the things that I've complained about, which was mainly about these two characters, who really seriously needed to be better established. I think that it was good. I like the action that they go through, and as controversial as this sounds, I do like Yoda wielding a lightsaber. I love him using the Force, but I also love seeing him wield a lightsaber and fight Christopher Lee. It looks silly, but it also looks fun. And come on, you got Christopher Lee. You know it's gonna You know he could read the phone book and he can make it sound absolutely villainously delightful. So you can't really go wrong with that. But aside from that, this movie could have really done much better to establish who Anakin Skywalker and Padme are, and when could R2-D2 fly? And if he could fly, why didn't he fend off the why couldn't he fend off the Sith in the original trilogies then? If he's that awesome. So but it makes it fun to watch. So I'll give it that. Number 6, Last Jedi. Yeah, I know. It sucked, it's terrible, it's the worst of all the Star Wars movie, it betrayed everything. I get it, kind of. I can see a lot of what's wrong with Last Jedi, but I enjoyed it. And yes, I am still staying in the Star Wars fan base, so you're not disincluding me yet. I like Last Jedi. I don't think it's the best. Mind you, I do not think it's one of the best Star Wars movies, period. What I do think it is okay. Fun in some areas, and really bad in others, and laughable in others. But I think it could have been a lot worse. Hint, hint, Phantom Menace. What Last Jedi gets good, I like what they do with the Force. I like how Rey and Kylo Ren communicate using the Force. And as much as I don't like to see Luke go the bitter route and going, I never want to fight again, or never want to use the Force again. I never want to face Kylo Ren. Even though I don't like seeing him go through that, I think in some ways it could be understandable, a wise mentor fails his student. Though I still find it shocking that he actually tried to kill his student. But I think the biggest thing that I hate about Last Jedi is when is the moments with Finn and Rose. I I don't entirely hate most of the moments they're together and freeing the and that they're on what I'm gonna call Las Vegas planet, because just look at where they hang out for a while. It's basically Las Vegas planet, and I forget what their plan is. And when Finn tries to act on his plan in the ending part, Rose foils it, all because she's in love with him. And I thought, you ruined everything. He was gonna stop the First Order, and you ruined it. So, for me, that was the worst part of Last Jedi. I like the fight choreographies, I like the costumes, and while and I wanted to, and while I did want to see Luke have a face off between him and the First Order and Kylo Ren, I would have loved to see that. I thought the way that the cinematography was shot was beautiful. And but I still think that Luke could have been given a better farewell than what he was in Last Jedi. But I liked seeing that he became one with the Force. But aside from that, it really could have been a lot better. And I know it deserves to be lower on the list, but personal preference, what can you do? Number 5, Revenge of the Sith. Okay, yeah, this is of all the movies that have felt very rushed, and where I've talked about feeling rushed, like Rise of Skywalker, this one really, really felt rushed from beginning to end. It was like the writers remembered, oh man, we're supposed to write down how Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. Quick, how do we do this? How do we quickly turn him to the dark side, since we've not established in the other 2 movies how he became interested in the dark side? So, my biggest problem is that it wraps up rushed, and it feels very rushed on how he turns to the dark side. Some of the concepts on how he turns to the dark side and the reasons that he turns to the dark side are very interesting. Like, he turns to the dark side because he thinks that's the only way that could save Padme from dying in pregnancy. But, did you have to turn to the dark side and kill younglings, in order to save her? Because that doesn't really make sense. And that doesn't work. And that makes you look evil. And I get, he's turned evil, but one thing that I've liked in Empire Strikes Back is that it draws the thin line between black and white. This one doesn't. And, he pretty much, he just goes straight ahead with it. And another fault that I've had with the prequels that I keep forgetting to mention that this movie finally deals with is, how does nobody recognize that Palpatine is the Sith Lord all throughout? Because he keeps dropping major hints that he's the Sith Lord. And heck, I know that he's wearing a hood in some of the, in some of the calls that he makes, but his face and his voice are not that well disguised. And, but that's enough with the bad stuff. What's good about it? The action's great, and it feels like a legit Star Wars movie. What a legit Star Wars movie should feel like. The Jedi are using both the Force and lightsabers, and it is funny to see the Emperor using a lightsaber. And the guy playing the Emperor is just he's having a ball, and you know it. You feel it from him. The guy playing Obi-Wan is spot on. He's terrific. Ewan McGregor. And on occasion, I think Hayden Christensen can do a good job at being young Darth Vader. I mean, like I said, I mean, like I said, George Lucas did not do a good job in helping him deliver his acting. But also, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, at least he wasn't Last Airbender bad. I And once again, I like the John Williams music, seeing Yoda in action. And that opera scene where he talks about Darth Plagueis is fun, is terrific. So, out of all the prequels, I do like this one. I just wish that the acting wasn't so wooden and that things didn't have to wrap up so rushed, because I I get that there are fan theories in between or the Clone War cartoons, but this is a movie. We're supposed to get invested with the characters before the fan theories come out, or the in-betweens. And I didn't really feel invested with the characters during most of the time because they didn't establish them well. If they established, if they established Anakin Skywalker better, I would have either felt sympathy for his choice, or anger that he's turned that way, and I would have also felt sad for Padme. But I don't feel anything for either because they're not really that well established characters. Maybe they are in the books, or in the books or in the shows. Maybe I don't know. You guys tell me. But in the movies, I could not find myself getting invested with them. But at least Revenge of the Sith was the better out of all the prequels. Number 4, Force Awakens. And I get it. It's a repeat of A New Hope. But I guess that's another reason why I like this one too. It had been years since people of my generation had seen Star Wars in theaters. So to see a somewhat repeat of it on the big screen really meant a lot to me, in a good way. And bringing up brand new characters like Rey, and bringing up Finn as who was once a stormtrooper. Though I didn't know that stormtroopers could actually think for themselves. I actually thought that they were cloned to think a certain way. A hint, hint, Attack of the Clones. But I guess they can. And also somehow this one is not influenced by the Force whenever somebody uses the Force. Okay. And also, it was a joy to see some of the old characters return and still be themselves. I mean, I was in the theater when the movie played, and everybody was roaring with applause when Han Solo and Chewbacca showed up. I mean, it was cool. Well, it was cool to see. And I was surprised that the rest of the characters like C-3PO, R2-D2, Leia, even Luke Skywalker did not get the same amount of cheers as Han Solo. Luke Skywalker, you would expect he'd get more cheers. But I loved what they did with what they could with the story. The only problem I had with it, aside from the repeat, is what is the First Order and why? Because didn't we deal with the Empire in the previous trilogy? What are we dealing with now, and why? Where did the First Order come from? And this is another thing I should have brought up. Who is Snoke? I get that he's supposed to be like the Emperor knockoff somewhat, but none of the sequel movies explain who or why Snoke is. Just that he turned Han Solo's son again. Han Solo's son to the dark side. Okay, who is Snoke? Why didn't you establish? So the so that's one of the problems. They don't establish what the First Order is or who Snoke is. I but what they do give, I legit enjoyed. I and I guess this is a debate to be settled on. What's better? Seeing the seeing a repeat of the Star Wars episodes that we loved, and done in and done with different characters that they establish in a unique way, or is it better to try something completely new and off the rails? I mean, you pick. I In some ways I can understand a little bit of both, and it felt like I with the Force Awakens that they were trying to do a little bit of both, but also trying to I mean that they were basically saying Star Wars is back. Well, I mean Star Wars is back. Let's make the money. As well as Star Wars is back. Have fun. But yeah, maybe they could have gone in a completely new direction and, like I said, establish who establish who the villains are and why. I liked some of the new characters that they established. Like, I do like Rey. I mean, people describe her as a Mary Sue. Somehow learning the Force out of nowhere with no work effort, and Last Jedi was where she was supposed to learn more about the Force, and yet she learns it on her own. Well, when Force Awakens came out, we didn't know that. We were invested on who she was, where her background was from. Was she possibly related to the Skywalkers? But, yeah, I mean, with how it eventually turned out, yeah. So, on with number 3, Return of the Jedi. Oh, this was a lot of fun. And it was a perfect way to wrap up Star Wars altogether. Or even just this trilogy. They pick up where they left off from Empire Strikes Back, and they go all the way with wrapping up how Luke is going to deal with his long-lost father, and how Leia and Han Solo are going to penetrate the shield, guarding the Death Star. And they're doing it with a bunch of Ewoks. And if I'll be honest, I thought this episode was a lot of fun. I enjoyed a lot of it, and I especially loved the conflict between between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and Darth Vader figuring out, am I going to stand by my son, or am I going to stand by the Emperor whom I've served this whole time? You don't see it. You don't see his face, but you feel it from him because he's been that well of established character, and you feel the conflict in him. You feel that he is trapped within this system of being in the dark side, and that there's no going back. And Luke has hope that he can go back, and tries everything to make sure that he does go back, while also trying to not fall into the Emperor's clutches himself. And that's probably my favorite part of the entire movie, is him versus Darth Vader versus the Emperor, and the way it turns out, and Darth Vader's ultimate choice on whether or not he chooses his son over the dark side or the dark side over his son, while Luke tries to not give in to his anger and turn to the dark side like his father did. So, props to the movie for that. And I will say this, since I first saw the special edition before I saw the original edition, why is Anakin Skywalker younger, and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda are not allowed to be younger? When they're all ghosts and showing up and bidding Luke Skywalker farewell. Why? Why couldn't they be younger? I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a younger Anakin Skywalker if Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda could be younger, because Luke's not supposed to recognize a younger a younger Darth Vader. But even if he did, I am. But even if he did, like, why couldn't Yoda and why couldn't Yoda and Obi-Wan be younger? So that's my nitpick. But aside from that, I think it's a terrific wrap up, and one of three perfect movies. Well, somewhat perfect movies of the Star Wars trilogy. Number 2, A New Hope. I mean, you can't go wrong with this movie. It's a true classic. It's terrific. I mean, how could you not go how could you go wrong with this movie aside from adding McClunky and adding a Java repeating everything that Greedo said? Aside from that, I think it's good. Oh, and the fact that Han shot first. So, okay, those nitpicks aside, I think it's a terrific story. It has good story writing, and this movie was a gamble. This movie was a gamble right from the start for George Lucas. It was an effort on figuring out how can I make this good, and still capture an audience, because it sounded like, I mean, on paper, this all sounds like a cheap this sounds like a cheap idea. A princess in a galaxy far, far away in trouble, and two droids have to go looking for somebody who's their only hope, and this daydreamer comes to save them. That sounds pretty much like a cheap idea on paper, but the way they execute it with great acting and not as good, maybe not as good effects as they could be, but they eventually became better. Well, they became effects that you appreciated. Ultimately, and and it establishes Darth Vader as a sinister character and the antagonist, and it's scary and and literally a force to be reckoned with, and they establish what the Force is. And the fact that they could take this cliched idea story and turn it, and use it as something in a unique way, almost like what How to Train Your Dragon eventually did, taking a cliched story and turning it into something unique, is what piqued a lot of people's attentions eventually, as well as the fact that sci-fi was so cool in the 1970s, and the effects that they used were pretty much were fascinating at the time, and they made us they made the characters very interesting, very likable in a way where we could follow them individually. I mean, you could pretty much just just show one of these characters and we would follow them all the way, or show a bunch of them and we would follow them in the different directions that they go. Whether it was C-3PO and R2, or just Luke, or just Leia, or just Han Solo. I'm sure you'd all love to follow Han Solo. And Darth Vader. I mean, who wouldn't want to see what happens to these characters next? And how the Force works with them, and so on. And if their mission goes well or fails. And so that's A New Hope, and that's what I liked about it. And now everybody say number 1 with me. Number 1, Empire Strikes Back. Of all the Star Wars movies, I love this one. This is the movie I love the most. It took a lot of risks. It took a new direction. I mean, it took the characters we loved from A New Hope and took them in an entirely new direction. And it even took them to a darker stage. I mean, you see Luke wrestle with himself on whether or not he will join the dark side. You see you see Han and Leia fall in love gradually. And Thank goodness not Luke and Leia. They're brother and sister. Even though they share that one kiss. I and and it comes to the establishment of when they meet of when Luke has to train with easily my favorite character in the Star Wars universe, Yoda. Yoda is hands down my favorite character, and I, the main reason is not because of Baby Yoda. The main reason is because when we meet him, he's tricking Luke into thinking that he is just an annoying side character, but then he slowly reveals, yes, I'm this all-powerful trainer that you're looking for, and even can lift a ship with just his hand and using the Force on his side. And that him being small has nothing to do with his ability and his alliance with the Force. Just that he's allied with it and tries to get Luke allied with it. So, what's not to like about Yoda? Also, the fact that he's a Muppet. I say what you want, but he's a Muppet. He's even voiced by one of the Muppets, Frank Oz. And if you listen to how he sounds, he almost sounds like a combination of Fozzie and Grover, who actually do voice him. So, yeah, I love this character. I also like seeing Han and Leia evade the Empire as much as they can, only to get caught by them, and Luke finally finding out who his true father is. And what I also love about this is that it shows that it was the movie that showed that Star Wars was here to stay. That was not just a one-time lucky film that got botched by the holiday special. It showed that it was a franchise that was here to stay, and it was going to keep you hooked on as long as they could. So I have to give props to George Lucas for that film and just how terrific it is. Do I have any complaints about it? Not really. No. I love this movie, and I'd gladly watch it again 1,000,000 times over. So that's my thoughts for it. What were your favorite Star Wars movies? What order did you like them in, and why? I hope you enjoyed this movie. Have a great rest of the day and a great new year, hopefully.